Hi, Deacon Ed McCormick here at St. John the Baptist Catholic Community. This is the second in our series on what is Advent about. And today I want to speak to you about Advent hopes. During the Advent season, at every Sunday Mass, the 4 Sunday Masses, and during the weekday at Mass, we hear these beautiful, beautiful poems from the prophets, especially the prophet Isaiah. And the church here is inviting us to steep ourselves in the vision of hope that the great prophets offer us. And so I want to speak to you about Advent hopes. And the first hope that we hear about was last Sunday, where we hear in chapter 63 of Isaiah, the prophet speaking out for Israel, who is in exile in Babylon, and they're calling out to God, asking God to tear open the heavens and come down and act like God did at the Exodus. Act like God did when God came down on Mount Sinai to Moses. They want to be liberated from exile. They want to go home. And this poem expresses this deep hope that God will one day act and free them from exile and bring them back to their country. Now, most of us don't live in exile, although some of us do live exiled from our homeland. My mother was from Ireland. My mother-in-law was from the Dominican Republic. I know many people who are living here, not in their homeland. But many of us are from here, but we can experience exile in all kinds of ways. We can be living in the exile of our grief, the exile of our loss. We can be living in an experience of exile from meaninglessness or from the frustrations of family life. And we hope that God would act to take us out of this exile. So that's the first hope. Here's the second one, and we will hear this proclaimed this weekend. It's chapter 40 of Isaiah, where Isaiah begins with this announcement where God says, give comfort to my people. And in this poem from chapter 40, Isaiah is expressing the hope of Israel that they will return from exile. And the vision he offers is of God walking in God's glory and God's beauty ahead of them as they leave Babylon and head back to Jerusalem. And the image is of this voice shouting out in the desert, make straight the pathways, because the Judean desert is not flat. The Judean desert is filled with all these deep ravines or wadis. And so the image is of this voice in the desert who was calling out for beautiful straight roads and highways to be made, in which God will walk ahead of the people of Israel, leading them back home. This is this hope that Israel has for a new exodus, just as God acted to lead Israel out of Egypt. The prophet Isaiah in chapter 40 is hoping that God will act to lead Israel out of exile and back to Israel. And what dominates is this image of the voice announcing that there will be a new highway leading the people of Israel with God in front of them back to their homeland. And for the astute reader, you may notice that Mark's gospel begins with this quote of the voice in the desert. And Mark identifies that voice in the desert that says, make way for our God, as John the Baptist, in which John the Baptist is the one who is announcing by his actions the coming of the Lord, and the Lord here being Jesus. So the second hope is for God to act and to walk ahead of Israel and bring them home and out of exile. Here's the third hope. And this third one we hear in the third week of this season. And it comes from chapter 61 of Isaiah, where Isaiah says that the Lord will raise up a new leader, and the Spirit of God will come upon him, and he will proclaim good news to those who are in captivity, sight to the blind. He will bring release from those prisoners. And it's once again this image of God acting through a leader to bring about freedom and liberation for those who are in captivity. And you can understand that for anyone who's imprisoned, anyone who's captive to addiction or drugs or debt, or to hatred or injustice, they would want God to act and free them from their captivity. And for the astute listener, you may remember that in chapter 4 of Luke's Gospel, Jesus gets up in the synagogue, opens up chapter 63 of Isaiah, and proclaims this reading, and then says that today this is fulfilled in your hearing. And that takes me to the fourth hope. And the fourth one we hear from the second book of the prophet Samuel, chapter 7, verse 14, where God promises to David that he will raise up a future heir who will be the king, like David, but greater than David. And God promises that kingdom will be forever. So here we have in Advent these four hopes. This hope that God will tear open the heavens and come down and act to liberate God's people as God did at the Exodus. This hope that God will comfort God's people, leading them out of Exodus, out of exile. This hope that God will raise up a leader in which God's Spirit will come upon him, and he will be the one to free people from captivity. And finally, this hope for a future Davidic king whose kingdom will be forever. I want you to notice these hopes, none of them are hopes to get to heaven. They're all realistic, real-world hopes, and they are hopes in which they expect God to act in this world. And the reason the church has us listen to these promises is because it's trying to train us to see that what we hope for in Christ is not simply to escape from this world. We're hoping that Christ will act in our world and our lives. In the next video, I'm going to talk about John the Baptist, because we hear about him this coming Sunday and in the third Sunday. And the question is, why does John the Baptist show up twice every Advent? What's his role? What does he have to say to us? And what does he have to say to us about those hopes? I'll see you in the next video.